Good to see you all again. Thanks a lot for coming to the faculty office hours. This is really cool to see you all here. This is office hours for neuroscience, psychology, and biology. And we have two of our esteemed faculty who are here to join us. And their goal today is to give you an overview of the department and answer a lot of your questions. I know some of you are juniors, most of you are admitted seniors, but you are all, I'm happy that every single one of you are here. My name is Miljan. I'm the Dean, Vice President, Dean of Admission Financial Aid, and I'm the moderator for today. So I'm gonna ask that if you have questions, you private chat me. If you've been in these before, you know one of the reasons we have it on mute is because it's sometimes difficult with so many people to talk at the same time. But private chat me your questions, and I'm gonna get those to Paul. I'm gonna get those to Eric. We usually are able to cover every question you ask, but don't wait to send them to me. Feel free to send them right away because I'll start consolidating some similar questions. And if they don't cover it in their responses, I'll make sure that they get those over the course of this session. But without further ado, I'm gonna have our faculty introduce themselves.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Paul Curry. I'm in the psychology department and I'm a neuroscientist at Reed. I study the neural basis of behavior, including the neural basis of drug reward and drug addiction and relapse. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Zornick. I am a professor in the biology department. I also study the neural basis of behavior, but from a very, I would say, complementary but different way from Paul. I study how neural circuits generate rhythmic behaviors like vocalization in frogs, and how hormones influence those circuits and cause them to be different depending on different developmental periods of the animal or sexes or just different species. So I think we're in two different departments studying, both interested in how brains control behavior, and we together are part of a neuroscience program that offers a major for neuroscience, but also we teach students majors in our own disciplines, either biology or neuroscience or psychology.
I should also mention that I'm currently the chair of the Neuroscience Committee. Eric will be the chair next year when you arrive on campus. So you can certainly feel free to reach out to either one of us, or for that matter, reach out to any faculty in psychology or biology, and they can direct you to us, and they can answer your questions as well, because we have a number of other faculty members who are neuroscientists on campus contributing to the neuroscience program. So what I thought we would do is have, we'll talk about the program briefly. I'll talk about the psychology courses and let Eric talk about the bio courses that contribute to the major. So we have a major in psychology, a major in biology, and we also now have a major in neuroscience, which is a few years old. And so the idea is that the neuroscience major is for someone who wants to integrate biology, psychology, chemistry, and some additional science courses in their program. So it is structured. There are 18 units to that major. It's pretty heavy compared to other majors in psychology. It's 11 plus an allied field. There's more wiggle room in certain other majors for you. We'll admit that up front. With that said, besides biology and psychology, what you would need for the neuro major would include chemistry, so intro chemistry, 2 units each fall and spring semester. And then you would have upper level courses, possibly in chemistry, like organic chemistry. It's a 200 level course. You could take it generally in your 2nd or 3rd year, provided you take intro chemistry in your 1st year. And we can talk about that. How do you arrange 3 science courses with a lab, each with a lab plus human in your 1st year? And generally that's hard to do because we want you to arrive on campus thinking that you'll take 3 courses and not 4 the 1st term for most students. And so we'll talk about that. Eric and I probably have differing ideas, but in the end, they both work out. You could take intro chem and intro bio, and then in your 2nd year, take intro psychology and the labs that are associated with that, for example. Many opportunities, and you could certainly arrive on campus and not know that you're going to major in neuro. Just, I would argue, keep your options open, and by doing so, try to take some of the science courses and address them early, because that gives you more freedom in your upper years to take the courses you really want to, And hey, in your senior year, you could even take an arts course and have this kind of chill experience that might not be so science focused and myopic. I think that's a good idea. So just to overcap the psych, and then I'll hand it over to Eric. In psychology, intro psychology has changed within the last 2 years, and we now have an intro in the fall that's a lecture. There are some labs affiliated with that lecture. These are concept labs. So they're not going to be neuroscience focused, for example, or social psychology focused. They're going to provide, as a psychology major, a neuroscience major, or just a general science major, your ability to understand the scientific method, statistical analyses, when to incorporate certain analyses, and understand very generally what are the rules at play when you're looking at certain data sets, for example. How can you justify the manipulation of those data sets or the data analysis of those sets? And so that's what intro is about. It walks you in the labs through that type of concept lab. And then in your lecture, you're going to have, it's kind of like, I wouldn't use the term speed dating, although we tend to use it when we're talking about the course amongst faculty. I've just shared that with you. But essentially what happens is that each faculty member will rotate for 2 weeks. And during that 2-week period, they will talk about their area, not just their area of specialization. I will talk generally about neuroscience, for example. And then neuroscience would include, my first lecture is anatomy and physiology. And then I'll transition into appetite, drug reward. I do a few other things, limbic system physiology, for example, and circadian rhythms. So the neural basis of that. And some of my other colleagues might address other aspects that are not neurally focused. That gives you a complement for what psychologists study. It's a scientific study of behavior, and behavior is broadly defined. And then for upper level courses, you could take a variety of them. We have some suggestions on our website. What I would encourage you to do is work closely with your advisor. And if your first year advisor, incoming advisor, is not a neuroscientist or not a biologist or psychologist, you could certainly reach out to, well, in Eric's case, Eric, because he'll be the chair of the committee. He can give you some initial direction. And then what we'd encourage you to do is transition into a relationship with an advisor who is in the neuro program. If you're going to be a neuroscience major or a biology or psychology faculty member, they could advise you as well. So I have colleagues in social, developmental, and clinical psychology that can certainly be neuroscience advisors. Are they the strongest? Absolutely, but you probably would feel more of a sense of community if you were to have an advisor who is a neuroscientist. And in psychology, there are 4 primary faculty, in biology, 4 primary faculty that we could encourage you to at least talk to, okay? You could keep your let's say you have an advisor in political science or anthropology, and you really like them. We wouldn't tear you away from them, but what we'd encourage you to do is at the same time, continue to reach out to neuroscience faculty or biology faculty or psychology faculty. So you get that feeling of community, and you don't feel like you're isolated and trying to navigate a major on your own. Okay, so in addition to intro psych, there is the spring intro psych labs, and you'll see them when you're going to register. These are 200 level labs. And generally for a neuroscience student, we have asked in the past that you pick 4. In our psych department meeting earlier today, where we might reduce that to 2 because our enrollments are so high. It would allow you the opportunity to get into upper level courses more rapidly. I think that's the advantage. And at the same time, what I like about the 200 level labs is that it allows you to meet the faculty in a smaller and more direct way. And I think that benefit is going to be useful as you progress into upper level classes. You know me, you know I study ghrelin and ghrelin mechanisms, and that's about it. No, I do much more than that, but there's this facade that I just focus on ghrelin. So in addition to the intro platform, which would take you your first year, and if you don't get into intro, or you don't want to take intro psych your first year, take it in the fall of your second semester and then the spring of your second semester, and you'll be perfectly fine. And then the fun stuff happens because you can take upper level courses. I teach a course in behavioral neuroscience, a 300 level course, and a lab-based course, lab-focused course in the 400 level. I love teaching both of them, and both of them give you rich lab experiences. It's the same thing with bio, and Eric can talk about those. But the thing I want to get you to think about is, in addition to thinking of neuroscience courses, of course, you're going to think of college requirements. That's where your academic advisor is going to become very handy. They can help you navigate college requirements. if you're a neuroscience major, you're going to meet those requirements quite easily, I would argue anyway. But sometimes if you change majors, it could be a little more challenging. So that's why we would encourage you to reach out to to a neuro advisor in addition to your current advisor that you're assigned in your first year. Now, with that, I'll turn it over to Eric, and he can talk about the bio classes that we would highly recommend, especially if you're majoring in neuroscience. Okay?
Hi. Yeah, so exactly. It's really important to reach out to your neuro faculty if you're interested at all in being, potentially being a neuroscience major. We are your best resource, and we're always available to chat with you about all of your options. If you're undecided, you might want to think about a couple different scenarios, and we're really good at helping you sort of lay out those scenarios and figure out what the best possible approaches are. So definitely we strongly encourage you to talk to us often, and you have an assigned advisor. You can always change your advisor at any time, but you can also have unofficial advisors, and that's a really good way to go to talk to lots of your professors about different ideas and different possible scenarios. So I'll talk a little bit about my department, the biology department. So we obviously are not a neuroscience department like psychology. There are also lots of other subdisciplines. We have ecologists, we have cell biologists, developmental biologists, we have environmental scientists, we even have a computer scientist, which is a rare thing and a really awesome thing. We have Dr. Anna Ritz, who's a fantastic scientist and also biologist, and so she works with a lot of our students from neuro to ecology, working on computer modeling of different projects, and has such an amazing resource. So we're a broad, diverse department, and yet for the relative size of the department, it's fairly small college, small department, there are about 12 of us. We have 4 neuroscientists, which is really fantastic. And we all focus on different aspects of neuroscience. So Derek Applewhite studies cells and neurons and how those structures are formed. Kara Cerveny studies the development of the brain and the eye. Susie Wren, like me, studies the neural basis of behavior, but she does it in a very different way from me. She mostly focuses on genes and how genes are expressed in the brain, whereas I look more at sort of how the cells function, what are the different kinds of electrical activity patterns in the brains. So we have within biology a really quite remarkably rich set of neuroscience faculty. But talking a little bit about the courses that you'll be taking, you start with the introductory, the topics in biology, it's called, and that's 2 semesters where you have both a lecture and a laboratory component. And it used to be a little bit more, it used to be more faculty, so it was more like a speed dating kind of thing, like Paul had sort of mentioned, but now it's 2 faculty each semester. So in the course of taking the topics curriculum, you'll have 4 different faculty, and they're arranged in 2 different semesters to ensure that everyone gets a really nice breadth of, a nice breadth of biology. So you'll probably get some genetics, or you will definitely get some genetics. You will definitely get some ecology, some evolution, as well as organismal biology, and thinking about things like physiology in the brain and other systems like that. So it'll give you a really nice introduction to the breadth of biology, but still be focused enough that you get a little bit of depth with each of those. So it's not just a complete survey where you just bounce from topic to topic, but you really get to delve pretty deeply for about 6 weeks in each of our subdisciplines. So as an example, I teach 6 weeks of lab. I focus on the brain and physiology, but we also look at hormonal responses. So we do modern neuroscience techniques like optogenetics, where we can control neuronal activity with blue light. And and we think about things like how genetics affects your sensory systems. So really thinking broadly about sensory systems and hormonal processes and neural activity. But then in another example of a set of labs is Sarah Schock, our geneticist, who helps you actually genetically analyze different pieces of sushi to sort of figure out if the species that this fish is actually what the restaurant is telling you it is, which is a really cool opportunity to do some high-level bioinformatics work in your first year. So first or second year, depending on how you take it. So you get an introduction to a lot of lab techniques early on, similar to how it will work in psychology as well. So in your first 2 years, you get these great set of introductory lab techniques, and you start to develop a sort of a sense of what flavor of neuroscience or biology or psychology you're most sort of interested in, and then you can move in those directions in your upper level courses. So for the upper level courses in the neuroscience program, you have to take a genetics or cell biology course, which we think are really essential foundations in biology, as well as another course related to either developmental neurobiology or animal behavior. And my course, which is called Neurobiology and Physiology, where we really focus in on the cellular mechanisms of brain function, how neurons work, how they generate action potentials at a really high level. This is very focused on neurophysiology. But we do so in the context of how does the brain control bigger functions, so it's very much complementary to some of the things Paul does, thinking about maybe not appetite so much. Paul does a lot of that, but I think about how actually brain activity, neuronal activity can affect thirst or heart rate or even kidney function. So we do think about things in a broader physiological means, because a lot of our students are also thinking about wanting like animal physiology type experiences. And so you get a little bit of animal physiology in line at the same time as you're studying the brain and neurons. So I think it's a nice fusion of two broad topics, but we delve deeply into the neurophysiology component of things. And I actually bring some of my research into my teaching lab, as does Paul. In my case, we record from electrical activity from frog brains to study the circuits that generate frog vocalizations. And this is some of the research that I do in my lab and do with my thesis students, as well as summer research students. So I guess that's sort of a brief description of the courses you would take as a neuroscience student. I guess I would also mention now that there are summer research opportunities as well as during the school year in your junior year, even before you get to your senior thesis, where you work in one of our labs. And I think we can talk more about that in a bit.
Good. I think with intro courses as well, so you might be thinking, okay, well, how do I plan my first year? We're here to help you do that as well. And don't feel like you have to, besides Hume, which is going to be heavy writing and reading as well. And we want you to do well and enjoy it. It's a significant part of your first year at Reed. But also, whether you take intro bio, intro chemistry, or intro psychology in the first year, there is flexibility. And if you don't take one out of those three, it's perfectly fine to take it in your second year. Okay, so don't worry that you're delayed or behind. No, you'll be certainly well on track. And I think with intro psych, one thing I'll mention, as Eric did, and that is that the idea that the courses really are meant, these intro courses are meant to be foundation courses. So if you're majoring in psychology, I think, in my unbiased opinion, that the way we teach intro psych is fantastic now. There is much more of a research and a lecture integrated component. And that way you really understand, okay, why we do what we do as psychologists and as neuroscientists. So there's different segments, those 2-week periods where you'll have access to us in lecture. You will see us again in the spring in the lab. But the lecture component really does, each part plays off another. And psychology, again, is a scientific study of behavior. And that behavior is broadly defined to include cognition. And so you'll understand how what I'm doing has clinical relevance, translational relevance to the human condition. And that's one of the major focuses of psychology is we use that rat models or animal models, but we're ultimately trying to understand human behavior and human pathology. And the animal models deliver a lot in terms of understanding the underlying neurobiology, for example. Okay, so don't worry about having to make that first year perfect. It will be perfect regardless, and we'll be here to help you make those decisions. Again, reach out to Erica, reach out to myself, or for that matter, and any other faculty member in biology or psychology can certainly give you some feedback. And also intro chemistry, reach out to the faculty and they can talk you through it as well. Okay. All right. So I think it's at this point, we do have a question, and I think Eric's right. We also want to talk to you about summer research opportunities. Keep in mind that one of the hallmarks of READ, I think of READ as an undergraduate research institute. I know that sounds a little heavy, but research defines how we teach, what we teach, and where we teach it, for example. And we're constantly doing research and engaging students in research. And you might not know it when you're doing a project in one of my classes, but this is the first time we're doing that line of research. It's novel. We often take it to a conference or conferences, and we publish those findings as well. And certainly if you're doing your thesis, you could anticipate going to a conference with your data, with your findings, and presenting it there if you so choose. We're not applying pressure here, but that opportunity is pretty striking when you think about an undergraduate really getting involved in research. And we're changing the way neuroscience, psychology, and biology looks at undergraduate populations by saying, no, you're on board with research, you're part of the research community, you're contributing to it as well. And you're not just memorizing for the sake of memorizing the Nernst equation or something like that. There is much more to your education than just factual statements. At the same time, I think in neuroscience, this could also be a major that's used as a pre-med major. And yes, you will have to learn. I won't use the word memorize, but I'm implying it, right? You'll have to learn the content and be comfortable with it, okay? But if you're interested in majoring in bio, psych, neuro, if you're interested in being a pre-med, or you're just interested in taking some of our classes, certainly reach out to us because as you can see, we like to talk, okay? All right, now let's see, we have a question that says, asks about the junior qual and what exactly is the junior qual. Eric, do you want to take this one? And you can maybe describe part of the qual, or I'm happy to do it too.
Sure, yeah, so every student at Reed takes a qualifying exam in the spring, typically in the spring of their junior year. And so regardless of what your major will be, you'll end up taking a qualifying exam. And the structure of those varies from major to major and department to department. And so since the neuroscience major is relatively new, this whole program is just a few years old, we have a relatively new exam that is interdisciplinary in that it asks you to answer questions from both biology professors and psychology, but it's really just an exam in two components. It's a several day activity. So typically you receive the exam prompts on Thursday, and then you have until the following Monday to complete the exam. And the two components are quantitative and qualitative. So we have a few questions that are just asking you to do basic laboratory type mathematical skills, understanding different plots and dose response curves, and making sure that you've retained and can apply some of the quantitative skills that you've gained in your first couple years in both departments. And then you have an essay in which we give you an article, and you get to choose which article you read, but you essentially show that you're able to take a primary research article and read it and summarize it and explain what the questions were, what approach the scientists used to perform their research, and what their findings were and what the implications are of that research. And then you do something that goes beyond just summarizing and understanding the work, but you then devise a set of experiments, a fairly straightforward set of experiments that you would use to expand beyond what that research found. So every good research paper generates new ideas. And so your job in the qualifying exam is to understand or to find in that what are the most interesting new ideas that come from the new results that'll open up opportunities for doing new research. And then you propose, you say, if I could, if I had $1 million and a lab full of all the equipment I ever needed, here are the experiments that I would do to address this new question that came from these results. And that's actually a really high level kind of process, and it's not an easy one. So it's not something that you should be afraid of. But we try to prepare you for being able to do this kind of task, right? This is a qualifying exam. Qualifying means you're qualified to do thesis, but it's really just an illustration of you having gained some skills in both doing quantitative work, doing mathematics and other quantitative skills, as well as reading and synthesizing ideas about the literature. And so through your first 3 years, you get to practice those skills, right? So it doesn't, it happens at the end of your junior year, not at the beginning of your first year, because it takes years to develop those skills. And that's what all of our all of our courses are really working to help you prepare for. And we feel that our students are all very well prepared for it. And it's not meant to be something that keeps people out of the major. It's a way of just reinforcing and allowing you to practice the skills that you'll need when you do your senior thesis. And it sort of gives you a taste of what it's like to do a thesis, so that when you start in the next fall, you're ready.
Good, good. I think one thing I'll mention too, a lot of students initially stress out about the qual. You shouldn't. You have an entire weekend to do it. It's manageable. The psych qual is very comparable to the neuroqual, comparable to the bioqual in some respects. I think the issue is to just feel confident going in. You've taken the undergraduate courses, right? The qual isn't something that should alienate you in any respect from your major. You're at that point in time. It's really to help us understand if we're teaching you and setting things up in ways that you're acquiring the information needed to conduct a thesis. All right, so I know we have another question. This is an interesting one, and one that I'm asked fairly frequently, and it asks basically how in the sciences we actually use the conference style format, or can we use a conference style format? And I would argue we actually do. All right, your intro level course is not conference style probably, right? And even your 300 level courses, I generally average around 40 students in my 300 level behavioral neuroscience course. But in my upper level, 400 level course, I cap it at 12. And it is very much, even though we are doing an experiment, this is something that the whole course is conference style in terms of it's integrative, right? I'm no longer lecturing, which I like to do, but I actually like to sit at a bench with a group of students and talk about, we have this problem, let's research it, let's get the background information and see where we could go from here in terms of what are the next steps. And so absolutely in science courses, there are conference courses, there are conference seminars at the 400 level, both in psychology and biology. You can take a number of those courses. I teach one in neuropharmacology. Eric can talk to you about the bio courses in a sec. But the thing is, the nice thing about neuro and psychology and biology is that there's the integration. Lecture when you need it initially, moving into smaller lecture classes where you feel comfortable asking questions. Again, 40 students, 30 students, that's a manageable course, and you have the space to kind of feel like you can ask and intellectually thrive. And then your 400 level courses, which could be much, much smaller or more focused. Even if they're on the larger side, they're like under 24, that's still very reasonably managed. Eric, how about you? What about the bio courses that are conference style?
Yeah, so it's true that the sort of the necessary structure for biology courses is a little bit different than it is in the humanities and some of the social sciences, and that we really do have to lecture some material, right? But most of our lectures, and they tend to be larger than some of the conference courses, although not necessarily, it depends on the course. But we're there both to provide lecture material, but we also try to break up into small groups so that you can have small class discussions even within a larger lecture format. So you get kind of a mixture experience. It's really, lectures are really more of a hybrid between lecture and conference, I would say. And then really the strength and amazing curriculum in the biology department really comes from the 300 level courses, where we have those lecture courses paired with laboratories. With all of the biology upper level courses are paired with a laboratory, and it's not just you going through and doing some sort of canned experiment that somebody's already done a million times before. It's you getting to design your own experiment about halfway through the semester and carrying out research for half of the semester, trying to answer a question that you came up with on your own, and you work with partners to do that research. So it's novel research. It's driven by the student, and in that environment, I'm there, and it's me talking with 2 or 3 of you about your project every day in lab, and thinking about, generating new experimental plans or figuring out how to analyze the data. So the goals are similar from that in a conference, where you're interrogating a book and trying to find the evidence in a book and trying to explore that evidence. In the lab, you're creating that evidence on your own, and then using that to somehow support or argue with certain concepts that you might be learning in the lecture. So really, I would say that's where the bulk of your training happens, is in the lab. But then we also, again, have upper level courses that you can take 3rd and 4th year, where you're reading primary literature articles and discussing those in small groups in conference style, where the students really run the show, and they have conversations with each other about the arguments being made in the papers, and sort of challenging the ideas there. So you do get to do both in the sciences.
Good. Just briefly, I'll make one comment about funding, and then summer funding and academic year of research, and then we'll open it up to questions. And Eric brought this up a few minutes ago, and I want to reiterate that there are, first of all, as scientists, we're conducting research on campus all the time, year round, including the summers, and we don't get summers off. In fact, we take the summer as an opportunity to mentor students in our own lab. I want to get them just as excited about ghrelin as I am, for example, and that's my opportunity to do it, right? And so the college is very generous in that it has funding opportunities at the department level. So in biology and psychology, there are funding fellowships, for example, that you could apply for. They're harder to get, admittedly, in your first year, yes. But the fact is, as you become increasingly competitive, you become competitive for those fellowships as well. There's a science fellowship that I would encourage you to think about, and a neuroscience fellowship, which I would also encourage you to think about, and reach out to us, because the faculty would mentor your summer fellowships. Now, if you have some extra time during the academic year and you want to get involved in research, certainly reach out to us as well. I do this all the time. I bring students into my lab, and they're there along with thesis students carrying out a project. And we might get interesting findings for that, and it goes off to a conference. If we don't, it's still interesting. You don't have to have significant effects all the time, right? So I think we have an abundance of research opportunity, both on campus, and if you're interested in pursuing something at OHSU and the med school there, that is something we could help you with as well, okay? And they have generally, except for this summer, ample funding opportunities, right? So I think Portland is fantastic. Reed in particular is quite strong. And this is, again, part of our underlying mission, to engage you in research, because we see this as fundamentally critical in your education, okay? Whether or not you go on to be a psychologist, a biologist, or a neuroscientist, or a politician, right? Or presidents. Anyway, all right, with that, why don't we take a moment to answer some questions that may not have been asked already, or if you...
I think there's one more question about the 3-2 engineering program.
Okay, go ahead.
And the question was whether the junior students in that program do a junior qual and a thesis, and I do. So I don't know the answer to that question. So I will figure that out. So we don't know everything. And sometimes your advisors have to look things up because they haven't worked with students directly in a certain program. So I'm not super familiar with it because I haven't had a student do this program. So I will look that up. I'll do the research and I'll send that to you. Milian will put us in touch and we'll make sure that that answer or that question gets answered. And I haven't seen a neuro student do this, but I assume that a neuro major could do the 3-2 program, I believe. But again, I'll get some clarification on that for those.
In fact, I have a student who's currently planning to do that. I'm trying to talk him out of it. No, I should admit that. It's a challenge, right? And so the issue is we would probably expect the qual and to be done at Reed. And then the thesis, if they're in a program at another institution, as long as there's a capstone experience, we could be maybe a little liberal there. But it could be tailor-made to individuals, right? And that could also be reflected on what courses you took at Reed and what are you taking at, I don't know, University of Washington or something like that, okay? But you're right, there is nothing structured in concrete, and so that's why there's some flexibility.
And I'm gonna invite the guest who asked that question to send Eric a private chat with your email address, and Eric will follow up with you. That's a great question, and we can always find out more information. So we've got probably about 5 more minutes left to the session. So I'm just gonna ask these last couple of questions. Probably room for one more. If someone has a final question they'd like to ask, feel free to private chat that to me. These have been great so far. Study abroad, is it possible to study abroad with neuroscience? And what would that program look like?
I'll take it. Absolutely. We have actually several structured programs right now, which means we have institutions that are pre-cleared that have really concrete neuroscience programs. In Europe, for example, we're looking to expand upon that. There's one in Australia that I'd kind of like to encourage as well. You can actually come up with your own study abroad program as well. So reach out to another institution. It could be anywhere. I'm thinking Asian labs would be fantastic right now. There's a lot of science going on right now in China, especially, for example. And so certainly study abroad programs are meant to be an opportunity for you to engage in your field of interest, but also an opportunity to get cultural experience that you normally wouldn't get. So the short answer is for neuroscience, we absolutely have really strong study abroad programs, and we have the flexibility to allow you to develop, in consultation with the Neuroscience Committee, your own study abroad program. In psychology, there are even more study abroad programs available. Eric, how about biology?
Biology, yeah, there's a number of other biology programs as well. There's one in Costa Rica and several others looking at most of them are related to environmental studies and ecology, but you can tailor your own program in any, as a biology major and sort of customize that for you depending on where you want to go and what you want to study during that time. The one thing I'll say is that if you want to do that study abroad, and I strongly encourage it, it's a great opportunity. Make sure you start talking with your advisor about it from the first time you meet and start coming up with a plan. I mentioned you want to come up with scenarios of your 4-year plan, and you have to be thinking about that intentionally from the start to make sure that you don't get prevented from doing it because of some logistical problem. So if you plan ahead from starting in your first year, you can definitely study abroad, and there's a lot of great opportunities.
I think studying abroad 1 semester is perfectly doable. I had a student 2 years ago who got to the UK and really loved it and sent me an email the second week saying, I want to study another semester. I'm thinking, oh, wow, okay. So we made it happen. It's more difficult for 2 terms abroad, but certainly 1 semester, working closely with your advisor, we can fit it in. Okay. And it's a great educational experience overall, not just neuro-focused, but culturally really relevant and good. Any other questions?
So I have two final questions. The first is, if you wanted to minor in a language, would that be something you'd talk to your advisor about to integrate that into the neuro major?
Yeah, so I have an advisee right now who's a rising senior and is doing a minor in Spanish. And so that's something that he actually just kind of worked that in without me even realizing it, like saying like, oh, I'm going to take some, group A requirements and literature courses. And then all of a sudden he took a couple more classes and now is working toward a minor. So you can definitely do that. But again, you have to think about, it's all about your priorities, right? So you have, especially as a neuro major, you have, I would say, a few less potential elective type courses that you can take. So if you want to get a minor in a language, you have to be willing to dedicate a lot of your extra course time to that, but you can certainly do it. It's possible.
And keep in mind, the language courses are generally around noon, especially the intro language courses. So you want to make sure it fits into your program. I would encourage it if it's available. I'm in my own lab, I'm Canadian, so I have a couple students who speak French as well. And that's kind of fun. And they can also read French articles, which is kind of fun, and go to French conferences. So I think languages are underrated sometimes in the sciences, but at Reed, we argue that they're important. And getting a minor in Spanish would be fantastic, especially if you're coming with some high school credit. Okay.
Quick question. When we say advisor, is that the same as your academic advisor? Yep, that's the exact same thing. And what I'll ask Paul and Eric to do, I've asked this of other sessions, so I'd be curious to hear your answer. And just 2-sentence responses is plenty enough. Is plenty good. Many of our students know that Reed leads the nation for STEM grads, for students going on to get their PhD. That's in psychology, neuroscience, math, all of the sciences. We're a small place, yet we send more students per capita to go on into these programs. 1 or 2 sentences. What's the secret sauce? What is it that Reed's doing that's a little bit distinctive to allow for that?
I would say from the biology perspective, I already mentioned this, is that our upper level courses, the meat and potatoes, if you will, of our program are these 300 level courses that all have a lab component, and you don't just do canned labs, you design your own research. It is every class you take, that's like 5 lecture lab courses, 5 credits where you've designed research and carried it out over and over again. And of course the thesis as well, but lots of colleges have thesis. So I think from our department, and I think this is probably true across the entire college, especially in the sciences, you do real science from your first year.
Right. And I would just echo that. It's absolutely true, and this isn't a pretense at all. And I think this is what gets students more comfortable in science, because they're engaging in research and learning through research, and it's not just being lectured at. I think that's incredibly important. So, and I think it serves Reed well and serves our students very well as well. Okay.
Well, I just want to thank our 2 faculty members, Paul and Eric. Thanks so much for spending some time with our guests, telling them a little bit about your programs and the departments here at Reed. For everyone else, it's good to see you again. Also good to see some new faces and names. Later on today, we have, again, one of our special events. The Dean of Faculty, Nigel Nicholson, and the Dean of Institutional Diversity are going to present an academic panel. We usually do this during an open house. It tends to be a really popular program, so we thought we'd bring it online. That's going to be later on today at either 4 or 5 o'clock, I think. And we will continue our sessions later this week. And go back to the webpage. We've added a feature for you to submit questions directly to faculty who volunteer to answer questions about the department. So if you haven't checked that out yet, you can do that. And now you can go back. We have some of our recordings from previous sessions. So if you wanted to catch something, they're the long versions. Short versions are coming soon. But again, we're adding features every day to help you make an informed decision and for you to learn more about the college. So check them out, and I will see you all soon. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.